Hi everyone, it's Aga from EurekaCrystalBeads.com and I'm here with a super cool bead embroidery video. But before I get started, as always, don't forget to check out the rest of our channel, and if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you always know when we're posting new content. So in today's video, just like in the previous one, we're using the beads from our August 2024 beads collection. The one that had this beautiful inspiration photo in it, it was the Sunflower Bliss Collection that we made with Gina from Orchid and Opal Jewelry and Beads. And I love it so much, I simply had to make something in my favorite technique, which is bead embroidery. And that's how I came up with this sunflower earring or pendant. You can very easily make it into a pendant. You just make a loop with beads or put on a bail instead of an ear wire, and boom, you have a pendant. This is quite easy to make, so let's get started. Let me just briefly tell you a little bit about the beads that you're going to need to make this earring in case you don't have the collection, or in case you're watching this a little bit later and want to know what to use. So first up, I used this 2-hole because it has 2 holes. This 2-hole check sunflower bead. You get a lot of them on a strand, but for this, we're just going to be using 2 for the pair of earrings, and I really like them. They have this flat back, which made me think of bead embroidery. You're going to use some bar beads, and I absolutely love the color of these ones, as you can tell by my fingernails. You're going to need some 11-ohs, some black 11-ohs, which in this case the color is important because we want a nice background for our sunflower. You're going to need some 3mm Firepolish, and all of these beads that I'll be using are in the collection. And I'm also going to be using this 15-0 Miyuki mix that it was also in the collection, but I'm just going to be using one color of the beads because I really like this kind of yellowy orangey color here. Because this is an earring, you're also going to need some ear wires, and these are the ear wires from the collection. They are pretty simple, but so pretty. Now, in addition to that, because this is embroidery, you're going to need some beading foundation, so bead embroidery foundation. Here I have this square. It is roughly 1.5 inches. As you can see, this will be plenty enough. And I do recommend you use a black beading foundation. It can also be the stiff felt as well. This is also great to work with for bead embroidery, but I do recommend black because we don't want any other colors to peek through, and this creates a really nice background for the sunflower. And we're not going to be using any transparent beads, so nothing will get lost on this background. I'm going to be using a size 10 needle. As you can see, this is one of the colorized needles. It has a black color here on the tip, so it's a 10. But if you prefer a thinner one, 11 will be great, 12 will be good as well. When it comes to thread, for this project I'm going to be using 1G, and I do recommend you use a nylon thread as opposed to a polyurethane thread, such as Fireline or Wildfire. This is just my personal preference, to be honest. I prefer these more kind of sleek threads for bead embroidery projects, but feel free to use whatever you prefer. To melt the end of my thread instead of tying a knot, I'll be using a lighter. I'll finish the entire thing with ultra suede, but you can also use our velvet fabric. It's going to look absolutely lovely, or any other finishing material that you have and you use. And to glue it all together, I'll be using A6000, but you can also use a hypo cement or any other glue that will get felt and ultra suede together. And they're both porous materials, so you don't have to worry about it. The last thing, scissors, to cut off the excess foundation, the excess ultra suede, and the excess thread. Okay, I think we can start beading. Alright, so I'll start with a length of thread on my needle, and you can use any length that you feel comfortable working with, because you can always just tie a knot on the back and start a new thread. That's one of the reasons I love bead embroidery so much. I'm gonna melt the end to make kind of a melted bowl that will definitely be stronger than a knot. And we're ready to start. So as you can see, I already put a kind of an X on my foundation, more or less in the middle. And that's where I'm going to put my sunflower bead. Now we know this has 2 holes, so we're looking for them. If you want, you can also put a little dab of glue under this bead to kind of hold it so that it doesn't wiggle about as you try to put it on your beading foundation. And let's start. I'm gonna go through the foundation and through one of the holes. I'm holding on to this bead so that it's more or less in the middle. And I'm just going through the foundation again next to this hole on the other side. Now I'm gonna go to the other hole that doesn't have a thread in it yet. And again, I'm gonna go through and go through the foundation as close as I can to the bead on the other side. And I'm going to repeat that for both holes one more time so that this bead is fastened to the foundation quite well. You can make another round, but 2 should absolutely be enough, just to make sure that it won't get loose over time. Even though there will be glue here on the back, so it should hold everything together and prevent it loosening over time. But I'm gonna tie a little knot on the back to prevent that even more. And we can get on to making the petals for our flower, for our sunflower. Now you can put the bar bead next to your sunflower bead, or you can even lay it down like that, so that you know more or less where the hole is going to be, which is going to be a little bit closer. Yeah, more or less over here. And you can remember that, or you can just take a colored pencil. Here I have a silver colored pencil, and you can just draw a line more or less in the same distance all around from the bead, so that you know more or less where to put your needle. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a bar bead, an 11/0, and another bar bead. You can slide them down your thread and put it next to your sunflower bead, and you just stitch it onto the backing where the beads end, and you go all the way around to that first bead and a sort of a back stitch, and you go through all 3 of them. And now we're going to be picking up 2 beads, so 11/0 and a bar bead. You can slide them down, or you can eyeball the distance. Just like that. You can just kind of tap on them so that they get in line and get as close as possible to the other beads. And now we're gonna go back to that second bar bead, so you're going 3 beads back. And you go through the 3 last beads that were added, so the bar bead, the 11/0, the bar bead. And this is how you go around. You add an 11/0 and a bar bead, slide them down, or just try to guess the distance. Go back to the previous bar bead, and forward, and so on and so forth, until you've made a full circle. One more thing, it's so annoying that when your thread kind of gets tangled or gets hooked on these corners, so I usually, when I know I'm not gonna need them, I just round them up so that my thread is less likely to get hooked on them. Alright, let's make the flower. Alright, and that will be my last bead here. Since we started with a bar bead, we're going to end with an 11/0. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through that first bar bead with that 11/0. Put it in there, make sure it's not twisted, make sure the thread is not twisted, and I'm just going to fasten that bar bead on the other side because it wasn't fastened from the other side yet, and I'm going to go back to that previous bar bead, the last one that I added, and I'm just going to go forward and go through the next, which is the first bar bead that I added again, and I'm just going to go through the foundation to the back. And that's my flower. Now, because bead embroidery is not an exact science, you may end up with a different number of petals here. And don't worry if you end up with 2 petals next to each other. If this happens, you just go back like 4 petals maybe, so like a quarter of it, and you try to crowd them together a little bit more so that maybe you can fit that 11 in here. It is usually possible, and if not that, then do it the other way around, which is space the beads a little bit more out, a little bit more distant from each other, and one way or another this should work. There is not like a specific number of petals that you should have. You may have one more, one fewer, so don't worry about that. Okay, the next step here is actually going to the other hole of the bar bead. Now I'm on this bar bead here, so I'm going to push it down towards the foundation with my finger, and I'm going to go next to this other free hole here. I'll go through that hole, and I will simply add 3 11-ohs in between these 2 free holes of the neighboring bar beads. So I'm just going through this bar bead, and I'm going to push it down on the foundation and go through the foundation with my needle right next to that hole. And I just go on the other side, go through the foundation on the other side of this bar bead next to the hole, because on this side the bar bead is not fastened to the foundation yet. So I just have to do that. In the end, we want these 3 to be kind of in a triangle like this, so we want one of them to be elevated. So we have to make sure that the petals are at a correct angle, because if it happens that you fasten this one at this angle, then this one will be at this angle. They will be at different angles, just like here. They're not perfect. But if you just hold them in their position as they are now, if you hold it down and then fasten it here, this should be okay. So I'm adding another 3 11-ohs, going through the petal, and before the 11-ohs fill this space, I'm gonna hold it down and go through this foundation with my needle, so that I know, or you can just shape them in this triangle like that, and then go through the foundation on this other side, so that you don't spread them apart too much. So if you pull tight, this is where it is. And you just do this all the way around. I can see my thread is running out, so I'll be adding some more in just a second. And the way I'll do it is I will just tie a knot on the back, getting my needle under some of these threads in here. I'll tie a knot, trim off the tail, and add a thread exact same way I did in the beginning. And continuing on with my circle. Alright, these are my last 3 11-ohs. So I just go through that first bar bead that I added, and through the foundation on the other side. If some of your 3 11-ohs don't look that good, like this triangle, if they're a little bit more flat, don't worry about that. We'll fix that in a moment. Alright, so I went back through the foundation, and now we're going to be filling these spaces in here. You can just leave them empty, to be honest, but I want them to be filled with a single black 11-oh, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'll pick up a single black 11-oh and I'll just put it in that space. So I went through the foundation upwards to the front of my work, next to one of the bar beads, like halfway through the space that I have here, and I'm just going back. And you might want to kind of straighten out your bead in that space if it doesn't want to stand up on its own. Then in the next space, and I'm choosing the thicker beads because they will fill these spaces a little bit more fully. And again, I'm just going to the back on the other side of this space. And again, you just do it all the way around. And I'm done with filling the spaces. What I'll do now is I'll actually finish the thread with a knot on the back. But you will still be using that thread, so don't throw it away. And I did that because it's easier at this point to cut the foundation than later when we add the 3mm fire polish. So you're going to cut the foundation. You can see where the thread is going. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little loose, so in a safe distance from my work. Like that. I'll check how far this is from my beads. You can cut like a little bit in here, and you can see that next to where the thread is going is more or less right where the top bead in the 3s is, so you can safely cut from the front or from the back, and you want to end up with a nice tight circle. I'm just going to go bit by bit. Alright, that will be absolutely enough. As you can see, the 11-0s are kind of peeking out at the edges. And with the cutting, just be careful. It's always possible to cut a little bit more, but it's really frustrating when you have to go around through some of these beads because you cut through the thread that was already sewn into that foundation. Okay, we're now going to come back to that thread that we left, and I'm gonna come up next to one of the bar beads, whichever one. I'll go through the bar bead and through 2 of the 3 11-0s here, and I'm gonna fish out this color of 15-0s from the mix, this kind of orangey, burnt orange sort of. I'm gonna put on one 3mm fire polish and then another 15-0. And I'm just going to go through the next middle 11-0 in the next 3. And I'll do this all around. Right now that's my final 3. I'm going to go through like 2 sets of these 15-0 fire polish 15-0 once more. I'm not gonna go all the way around again through this final row because I actually want there to be some space. I don't want the last row to be very stiff because we're going to be doing a slightly different edge to finish the work. And it's going to be quite interesting, but for that we need these fire polish to be able to move back and forth, and we don't want them very stiff. So I'm coming out of this 11-0 here at the moment. I'm also going to go down the third of the 3 11-0s here in between the petals, and I'm going to go back through the foundation and tie a knot and finish my thread. Alright, so the embroidery is technically done. What we're gonna do now is finish it with ultra suede and then make a beautiful edge. So I'm just measuring how much space it will take. It will fit there. Now, if you're working with something else than the beading foundation or stiff felt, this might be a little flexible. This is already a little bit flexible, but it's good enough for this size of beadwork. So you don't have to put anything in between the layers to make it stiffer. But if you're using a different material that is a little bit more flexible, more bendy, then you might want to put a piece of hard paper, of cardboard, in between your layers that's slightly smaller than the felt in here, so that you have a margin that you can sew through and you don't have to sew through the cardboard, and that will stiffen your earrings without giving and adding much more weight. But I don't need to do that here, so I just take my glue. You might also want to have an orange stick ready or a toothpick to spread out your glue because E6000 is thick. So I'm just going to squeeze some out. Yeah, it's very, very thick. You don't want too much. And you just spread it around. This one is kind of a little bit, it's been in that tube for too long, in that open tube. Well, you basically want to have it in the middle mostly. You want to have this margin like that. The layer doesn't need to be thick. On the contrary, it should be kind of thin so that it doesn't go through your ultra suede. And then you just put it on and squeeze it a little bit. And then you leave it to dry. Ideally, you should leave it for 24 hours, but if you're impatient like me, you can just leave it while you're making the other earring, and then when you make the other earring and glue the backing on, then you put this away and just finish this one, and when you are done with this one, then you can finish this one. So typically an hour should do it for the glue to mostly take hold, and then you can work with it and then let it dry completely for the next couple of hours. So that's what I'll do. I'm gonna leave it here for about maybe an hour. Okay, so it hasn't exactly been an hour, more like half an hour maybe, but I'm too impatient to get this tutorial out to you. So let's make it also a test on whether this will fall apart. So I'm cutting off the excess ultra suede, and now I'm gonna cut along the edge of the felt. You can do it looking from the front and kind of resting your scissors on the felt so that you know more or less where the edge is. I find it very comfortable to do, especially if you don't see the felt because it's like under the beads a little bit. Okay, I think we can give it a little bit of a trim, like just a tiny bit so that the edges are more or less even. Yeah, exactly like that. Alright, I'm good with all of that. Now it's time to finish the edge. I'm gonna put some thread on my needle, and this time I'm going to put a little bit more than I would usually for bead embroidery. Maybe half a wingspan of thread, or a little bit more even, but a half a wingspan should do it, because I don't like to finish my edge in more than one piece whenever I can, and this is a small earring, so I can just finish the edge with one piece of thread. We're gonna go in between these layers here, because remember we left a margin so they're not glued together to the very edge. So we're gonna go through the ultra suede a little bit away from the edge and more or less where the Firepolish kind of ends, maybe a little bit further away, like just about here. And you can do it while you're looking at your work from the back or from the front. And now I'm going to pick up two 11/0s, and I'm going to try to pick more or less similar beads, so with the same thickness, and I go next to the next Firepolish bead, and I'm gonna go through both of the layers, so both through the foundation and through the ultra suede, and then I'm gonna go back up through that second bead that is added, just like that. So I'm going from the side of the bead where I came out of the ultra suede with my thread towards the side where it's connected with the other bead. Now if you want, you can just finish the edge with just this brick stitch, and we do have tutorials with more comprehensive instructions on how to brick stitch an edge in bead embroidery. So one of the recommendations will pop up somewhere up here in the upper corner. But meanwhile, I'm not gonna add any more black beads for now. I'm just going to go through the next Firepolish in here. Then I'm gonna pick up one black 11/0, and I'm gonna go through the layers right after where this Firepolish is, and then I'm gonna go back up through the 11/0, and I'm gonna pull tight, and this will bring this Firepolish a little bit down towards the edge, so it's both part of the embroidery and part of the edge, and I really like this effect here, the second 11-0 here. And again, I'm gonna go through the layers next to the previous one, and right before that fire polish, back up through that bead and through the next fire polish. Another 11-0 through both of the layers and back up through the 11-0, pull tight, and you just go around doing the same thing until you've made a full circle and you've come back to the first beads that you added in the edge. On a different note, this is how many of you watch our videos but are still not subscribed. So if you do like this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, simply because you will get notified when we post new cool tutorials. Thank you! There, almost done. Beautiful edge. Now I added my last black 11-0. I went through this 3mm fire polish, and I'm gonna go into that first 11-0 that I added here, and I'm gonna go through the layers just as if I was adding it, and I'm gonna go up through it, and there, that's my edge. Now it's time to attach the ear wire, so I'm just gonna go back through that fire polish here, and we're gonna make this cute little loop by adding first a 15-0, then a black 11-0, then a 3mm fire polish, an 11-0, then our ear wire, an 11-0 fire polish, 11-0, 15-0, and we're gonna go around. And you have to mind which direction you're putting your ear wire in on your needle, because we want it to be facing like this so that the earring is facing the right way. So we're coming out of here, so I'm gonna go into that loop from this side because that's how we're going to be going. So that's our sequence, and I'm just going to go around this fire polish here. That's also a point where you can check if your ear wire is facing the right way. Mine is. So I'm just going to go through all of these beads in this loop 2 more times to secure it. Okay, now that I went through all of these beads twice more, so 3 times in total, I want to pull tight and then go through some of the next beads. So like the 15-0, then the 11-0, the next 15-0, and that's where I'll tie my knot. And then hide my tail thread and some more beads. And the earrings are ready. Aren't they so cute? And they're not hard to do at all if you think about it. The only frustrating part is waiting for the glue to dry, which is the part I like the least about bead embroidery. But as I said, you can have a system, especially with earrings, where you can just make this one, then glue it on the backing, wait for it to dry, and in the meantime do this one, and then glue this one on the backing and set it aside to dry, and finish this one, and yeah, you're set, so you don't have to get bored while the glue is drying. Again, all of these beads are from our August 2024 collection that we made with Orchid and Opal jewelry and beads. It's lovely. It's called Sunflower Bliss, and I think these earrings represent the vibe and the atmosphere of the collection quite well. So if you like this tutorial, give us a thumbs up and visit our Facebook group where you can share pictures of what you made with our tutorials. All of these materials, as always, can be found at eurekacrystalbeads.com. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one. Bye!